Well, our next guest has been calling for a 40 to 50% plunge for years, and he believes that the downturn is almost here. Former Texas Congressman Dr. Ron Paul joins us on the show now. Welcome, Dr. Paul. Always great to see you.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
All right, let's just start broadly and talk about where you're seeing the markets right now in terms of that market meltdown that you've been calling for on this show for quite some time.
Well, in the last, 8 or 10 months, the market has taken a turn down. It's been down 10% or so. And I think it's a very vulnerable position because when markets are destined to make big corrections, as I believe, they don't do it from the top. They do it from 10 to 15% down. So we're at that position. So once this volatility shows that we're not going to resume the bull market, then people are going to rush to the exit. So I suspect that we're at a very, very precarious point where people are going to say, hey, there's something wrong going on. And I am not optimistic that all of a sudden you're going to eliminate the tariff problem. I think that's here to stay. I don't think the tariff man's going to give up. I think tariffs are taxes, and I think there's always, contests for that, and the tariff wars go on. I think they're very, very bad. They've never been good. And if you look at the markets, vulnerability here, it really started when they started talking seriously about tariffs. And I think tariffs, we should look at them as taxes and not try to excuse ourselves and, okay, the steel industry's doing better today than they did last week, and therefore tariffs are wonderful. I don't believe that.
I think a lot of investors would agree with you that bouncing in and out of correction territory like this is certainly a signal that this market is thinking about what's to come, certainly in 2019. What do you think the catalyst will be? Will it be tariff-related, China? Will it be Fed-related? Will it be something else coming out of Washington? Or is it just time for this bull market to take a step back?
Well, the precipitating factor will be that black swan. It's coming. The situation is ready for it. It's very precarious. The debt is too much. All the malinvestment is there. The government can't handle the problems. There's too much antagonism, and it's all going to get much worse. So you need a precipitating factor, like Lehman Brothers and things like this. But it might not be just an ordinary old-fashioned bankruptcy. It's going to be something, and it could be international. It could be related to this tariff war that's going on. But the big thing is not to pretend we know exactly what the issue will be or the day it's going to happen. The challenge we have is identifying where we are and why we're there. And when these markets are building and getting distorted with interest rates that are zero and distorting the whole market and running up all this debt and bailing out a bunch of people and others suffering the consequences, then there's a bubble out there. So identifying it and why it is happening is the first thing. Exactly when it's going to come, we don't know, but it'll come.
Dr. Paul, it's Jim Uriel out in Chicago, and there's a lot, we've talked on this show with you for 6 years, and there's a lot I agree with you on, and there's certainly a lot that I don't agree with you on. And one of the things that I have a problem with is the absolute inevitability. And just to underscore that, if you were in a special position of president and chairman of the Fed right now, are there steps that we could take to circumvent this eventuality?
No, there's nothing you can do.
Okay, short answer, right?
No, and this was just demonstrated recently when the Fed took the position, hey, we're in trouble. We have this balance sheet. We got to do something with it. Now we're systematically and automatically going to, reduce our balance sheet. So it goes for 2 months. Trump yells and screams. The market gets a little shaky and they back off. Oh, we have to find that neutral rate. They actually believe they can find the neutral rate of interest, the proper rate of interest. It's a total fallacy. Nobody knows that is.
Are you encouraged in the least bit that we've taken 2-year rates from 0 to almost 3%? Is that nothing to you?
Oh, yeah, I think that is something, but it hasn't solved the overall problem. But maybe they're supposed to be 4% or 5%. And it hasn't made me happy. I try to protect myself and my family with some CDs in the bank because I'm not as smart as you guys and know how to invest. So I have some CDs. What do I make? Less than 1%. So somebody's getting cheated on this deal, and they're retired people. That problem has not been solved. So nobody works for capital that's developed in the marketplace. Capital comes out of a printing press at the Federal Reserve, and it won't work.
Dr. Paul, You talk about the tariffs. I mean, what happens if nothing happens with China? Then we just go back to where conditions were before. I mean, that's the worst that can happen. The best thing that could happen is we have a deal and it's better trade for the U.S. and better trade for China, that the markets are opened up. So, I mean, isn't it possible we could have a white swan event here where we get a good trade deal or nothing a trade deal and we just go back to where it was and the economy just chugs along the way it was before? But we could get a good trade deal here, and the market could trade higher off that, or probably will trade higher off that.
Yeah, and it may, and you may be right about that, a temporary stuff, but you have to realize the trade wars come as a consequence of the monetary policy, because we have the reserve currency of the world and we can print and spend money and buy whatever we want overseas and run our military industrial complex as we please, and we get them to loan the money back to it. And that's where the imbalances come from, and then they try to solve that with trade wars. No, I would say you can get back to square one, which I think was square minus one, that you can't. It may be temporarily better if they just back off a little bit, but they are using trade wars as a solution to the imbalances. Also, they'll use currency wars. Notoriously, they're always being used. We use them all the time. We have artificial interest rates, and we manipulate our currency. They all do it, and it's all because you don't have a definition of money. Money is just whatever the Fed manipulates and calls money. And I always would ask the Federal Reserve Board chairman, what is money? What is a dollar? They can't even answer it. And it's just what the Fed says.
Well, couldn't you almost say that with debt? Well, then couldn't you say that with debt also? Isn't debt just a number?
Sure, it is.
Debt is just money too.
It's destined. And it's destined to destroy us. An honest debt, in an honest society, I could borrow money if you saved it and build my house or build a business. But now you don't do that. You have to go to the Federal Reserve and say, I need some money. So that's no problem. And then you run out and you run into problems, you run into bankruptcies. So they do, well, we need a lot of money. All right, QE1, that'll solve our problem. Oh, now we need QE2, QE3. See, I'm predicting that they can't solve this problem that is coming because interest rates are too low and they don't have any room, and they will go back to QEs and they'll pass out the money.
Dr. Paul, let me ask you this. The downturn that you're forecasting in the market, how bad do you think it'll be? Looking back in terms of history, is there anything you can compare it to?
Well, I just think there's no sign that it's going to be mild. And it depends on what the government does. If you allow the liquidation, it doesn't last long. I would advocate, allowing it to liquidate itself like in 1921. No, I think it could be worse in 1929. And because we can't keep our hands off, we prop it up. It's like taking drugs. And I think all this QE bailout was just loading up on the drugs. It was so dependent on free money. But unfortunately, what happens is the money doesn't get distributed fairly, and that's why you have social chaos, and that's why you have socialists making headway in the elections, because of the maldistribution. We don't have a market economy, and I get very annoyed when they say, see, Ron, that free market stuff, it doesn't work. Look at the terrible situation we have here, and that is the reason why I think it's so important to understand the original cause and the problem, and that is the Federal Reserve running up debt and letting politicians spend money, and having conservatives, when they get in office and control the government, they're worse than the Democrats because they're totally dependent on it. They are addicted to it, and it is true that if you immediately instituted the policies I'm talking about, it would be tough. It would be tough. And
right.
That's why there's a way you could do it gradually, but they're not going to for political reasons. But when the really big bust comes, and there's going to be a challenge, we're going to have a lot of rebuilding to do. And that's when I think this philosophic approach to monetary policy will be absolutely necessary.
Okay. Dr. Paul, always great to see you. Thank you and happy holidays.
Thank you.
Jim, let's